Welcome to the Boundless Psyche Timeless Soul Summit, where we're exploring the importance of bringing a spiritual perspective to our individual and collective healing work. Our hope is that you will emerge from this gathering with a deeper understanding and reverence for some of our processes of inner knowing, all or most of which are ancient, and that you will feel more tapped into that sense of connectedness that is so essential for our well being. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy Dicker, and today I am so excited to present Dr. Taria Ward. Hi, Taria.
Hi, Stacy. It's so nice to be here with you, and I just love the topic of your summit. So I'm really, really pleased and honored to be part of it, and can't wait to hear the rest of your speakers. So thank you for inviting me. Yes.
Thank you so much, Taria, for those beautiful words and for participating and being here with you. Okay. Taria Ward, PhD, lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where she has a private practice offering dream analysis, psychological, and spiritual guidance to clients from all parts of the world. Taria has worked extensively with her own and other people's dreams for more than 45 years, and for nearly 30 years has been an avid student of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. She has conducted a monthly global community dream symposium since early 2017, wherein persons from all over the world come to share their dreams and listen to the collective dreaming minds. Taria conducts retreats and vision quests, teaches online courses, and teaches to a wide audience in regular interviews and lectures. She also offers private oracular readings upon request. Her email is Taria, and that's spelled Tayria. So it's Taria at tariaward.com. And her website is tariaward.com. And I highly recommend you check out her site because there is a ton of amazing stuff on
Oh, thank you.
there. Welcome. So today our topic is Beware the Cultish Mindset. So Taria, can you please tell us about your title to start?
Yes, Stacy. It's so interesting. I really got the sort of good energy from what your topic is. I just love it. And my mind was going all over the place of all the different things I might like to discuss with you about, so many interesting ideas and things that I would love to. And then this one just came in. And, I suppose there's, you know, sort of obvious reasons for it, but it just came in so strongly. And I thought, okay, it's time to take this subject on. I talk about it, sometimes in my teaching and sometimes in, private conversations and so forth. But I feel like becoming a little more conscious and aware of what the cultish mindset is about feels like it's a calling right now. And so I decided, all right, then, I'll listen to my guides and that's what we'll talk about today. So I'm glad that we're doing it. It feels important, and there's so much to know about it. I have so much to say, but there's so much to know about it, and I feel it feels important for all of us to just consider, these things. So, I would say the idea of it's a very tricky subject because basically there's almost no one anywhere who will say they're in a cult. So, it always feels like those people over there that are kind of like, you know, deluded or something that are involved in a cult, but, you know, not myself. And probably anybody in any kind of system like that, you know, projects it outside, but, uh, kind of doesn't understand the complexity of what it actually is. And I feel like it's time, especially with the polarization in, those of us who are from the United States are certainly experiencing it in a very dramatic and radical way right now, where there's just so much polarization. I've never seen it before. I'm 72. I've never seen it like this before. And so, I didn't live through the Civil War, of course, so I'm sure, but here we are. And I feel like that's going on all over the world, with all of the conflicts, and it's becoming, it's like I see it as like pus that's rising to the surface. It says there's an infection here. Let's check this out. What is causing this infection? And so I think, let's do that. Let's sort of see. And the thing is that we're all in a cult. I will say that. It's a mindset, and it's hard to be a human in this century without being sort of addicted to the mindset of modernity. I'm in the cult of modernity. I don't particularly want to be, and I can somewhat identify that I am, but I don't know how to break the spell of it. So it's not just something that's happening out there. It becomes, and we can say it's toxic over there because look what they're doing, but it's toxic in here too because of what it's silencing in us, and because of the parts of ourselves that don't get to develop because we are in this particular thought system that we are, um, in some ways born into. So, a family can be its own cult, a nation. Um, I can go on and on, about, I think academia is a cult. I got my PhD and, then started wandering, into other territories of thought that weren't very academic. And I could feel my academic training like saying, do not go there, not even to mention what I feel my colleagues would say. But, it's internalized, these things. And if you listen to people in the world of science, they have their theories and they have their conclusions. And if you're not on board with this, it's a very cultish kind of mindset. I mean, even, I've studied scientists like David Bohm. I did a lot of work about, I used to teach a course in college on his thoughts, the physics of thought. And his subject was about, basically, it was based on his experiences within science where people can't even hear thoughts that disconfirm their own reached conclusions and realities. Um, I heard an example of this once, and I'll tell it. It's so interesting. It was to me so illustrative of what I was learning about what Bohm was saying about the nature of thought. But this was early on, way before school shootings were a thing, that we knew about. It was one of the earliest ones where it was just shocking the world that somebody would go into a school and shoot up children. Um, might have been Sandy Hook, but I think it was actually earlier than that, even Columbine, maybe. I don't know.
I was just going
Anyway,
to guess. I wonder if it was Columbine. I was
it,
living in Denver at the time.
oh,
So
really? Yeah, it might have been that one. Anyway, I heard the story about one of the mothers of one of the shooters who said after the event that she saw her son go out the door that day with his gym bag, which he always did, and he had a big old like AR-15 or some kind of gun just hanging out of the gym bag. And she said, I didn't even see it. I didn't see it. It didn't even occur to me. It was like my brain couldn't register that my son was walking out the door with one of these deadly weapons. I couldn't see it. And then after the fact, when that happened, she awakened to, and I thought, that's how thought works. We don't even see it. If it doesn't match our concepts or our interpretation of reality or what we expect from reality, we don't even see it. And so that's the kind of thing that we're working with, and this is the aspects of mind that need to be discovered. Um, and so, I can say a little bit of my own history with this, going through my life. I was raised Catholic, um, and I'll never not be grateful for that. I learned so much about devotion, so much about attention to the bigger realities, so much about Jesus, who is ever and always a very important soul and teacher for me. So much about so many things. So I'm not here to denigrate that. But, I'm a 6-year old sitting in a classroom being told that I'm a sinner, that we're filthy and we're nothing. And only by some like great divine grace that we have to apply to on a daily basis can we receive the grace where we might be able to enter the kingdom of God. But it is not our birthright. And, we learned about hell, we learned about sin, we learned about the sacrament of confession. And I'd have to go into a confessional as a 6-year old and try to make up stuff that I did wrong because I didn't know. But you had to say something. And then you had to go do your penance. It was just wild. I think that was in the 50s. So I think that hopefully they're not quite as, I don't know if they're still teaching that stuff to children, but I just think it's very damaging. There's just so many things. Okay, so it didn't take me. I can tell the story of when I finally walked out of the Catholic Church. I was 17, and it was just like, that's it. I'm done. It's and but then I went through the era of the 70s and psychedelics and mind expansion kind of things. Um, and that was enlightening and destructive at the same time. And then I found a teaching that taught all of the religions, this wonderful teacher who had studied all the religions of the world and all the philosophies, had read everything from all the different philosophical traditions, all the esoteric traditions, all about science. She brought all these things together. It was a magnificent sort of, and she took on students. We became her students, and it was a ministry. And so I was ordained in that ministry. I served in that ministry as ministers do. I was speaking regularly. I was performing weddings and baptism, all those things. And then it took me some years before I realized that we really weren't that different from everybody else. We just thought our way was the way, and that I don't know if you. So anyway, it seemed like, and then there were ways that I wanted to explore, like Jung and other things, that I didn't feel the openness to bring that into what we talked about. We talked about scriptures, if it was in the Gita or the Upanishads or the Bible or any of these scriptures or any of these sort of approved thinkers, uh, that was fine. But if it was the sort of like going out there into these other dimensions, and then I studied dialogue and the way of opening our brain to other points of view, and I realized they didn't even want to hear that there. So I had to move on from there. And then I went into the dialogue world, and that was awesome. That's where I learned Boehm's theories, and we were learning methods for getting people into deep conversation where we were able to sort of identify the assumptions we bring to a conversation and learn how to learn the nature of thought and how it's constructed on these certainties and these assumptions. And then you listen to each other. But, extraordinarily, there were different dialogue groups. There was this one out of MIT where I trained, and then there was this one that was over here that had a different way of approaching it, or a different way of articulating it. And then I realized, these are dialogue cults? No, no, this cannot be. And then, and then I went into Jungian thought, and I got my PhD in Jung's concept because I was so interested in dreams. That was the main reason that I decided to get a PhD in depth psychology, because of that's the through line through it all. I learned about dreams when I was in my 20s from this spiritual teacher, and it's been the through line through my whole life. And thank God for that. And I think it's what took me through in and out of all these systems of thought. But even later, me working with dreams, if this isn't the Jungian way to do it, I've had Jungians sort of see how I work with dreams, and it's not Jung's way to do it. So, I'm really a apostate, that way? Like, what's she doing? Um, and I want to say to sometimes, to the Jungians, I don't, but do you realize that dreams have been around for millennia? You know, more time than we can count. People have been talking about dreams. So Jung arrived a century ago, that I appreciate, his thoughts about dreams, his way to analyze, but it's only 100 years old. I'm talking about millennia worth of how to consider, dreams. So that kind of helps me absolve myself somewhat. And, so anyway, and then I go into the indigenous world where, um, it's reconnecting with that voice that is so deep and original in all of us before enculturation, when we were listening to the voices of the plants and the rocks and the wind and the trees, and all of that conversation was part of our daily conversation. um, and I had years of experience of working with shamans, sweat lodges, many vision quests. Then I was leading vision quests. And then you get the people who say, well, you're a white girl. What, what are you doing leading a vision quest? It's like, so then, it's like, so it's just to understand that this is a way that we form our construct ourselves around anything that's good, basically, is creating these shoulds and these shouldn'ts and these do's and these don'ts, forming our opinions, forming our certainties, forming our judgments, and uh, excluding rather than including so many versatile approaches to whatever it is. And it seems to be, uh, at least currently, a very human tendency. And it's something to look at in ourselves. And where are the places where we don't even see? We can't even, even just be open to the idea that the disconfirming information to our particular reality might be right under our nose. And we can't see it. So, how do we address this? How do we go internally and deeper into that? And so, I feel like learning that this is a mindset, and a set mind already is, if you think about it, a problem, because the mind is so is meant to be so fluid and so open and so available to new information that's always pouring in from the starry cosmos. Every day is a new day in terms of the alignments of the planets, and it's all like bringing in new ways of perceiving and thinking and being. So how do we get into that and not lose ourselves? There is a thread that we follow. For me, it's been, as I said, it's been staying really close to my dreams all my life. They have guided me through and been very coherent and consistent with, my journey into and through so many phases of life, and so many things that, not any one of these things that I've just mentioned would I take a day back from. I learned so much there. So I don't want to be denigrating, certainly, of any of these things. Um, I've learned so much. I'm so grateful. And I'm just saying, beware. We have to figure out how to beware of the limitations then we impose on ourselves, and we impose on those we love, and that we impose on our culture and our communities because of our own sort of unwillingness to open ourselves to what's actually happening with this and what our tendencies are, just in terms of keeping our self safe as humans. And oh my God, now the people that want to go out with their guns and kill people who don't think like them. I mean, they feel so entitled, and it feels so necessary to them. It's like, just kill them all off. um, it's clearly pathological, what we're doing, what it has happened here. Um, so my goodness, I just took off on that. I think I kind of covered. uh, Oh, yeah, I just had one little note. When I left the church that I was in and was going into some sort of process for helping me deconstruct the, you know, there's ways that you can deconstruct when you come out of sort of an ideology. And had been to a few lectures or something like that. And somebody said, okay, now there were a lot of people in the room who has been wounded by leaving a very, you know, helpful, wonderful ideology that you've been involved in, you've loved, and now you're leaving, and then who is it that thought while they were in it that theirs was the only way? And who was it that still thinks that yours was the only way? And it's like people had to say, yeah, but those guys, but mine, what, it's so anyway, it was such a revelation to me to see that, that even in business, people who left the corporation and thought that there was something wrong with the way they'd organized themselves around their financial situations. Their kids couldn't see other kids that were, had left the corporation. I mean, it was happening everywhere. So then I realized, oh, this isn't just me, and my little thing was so, there was something wrong with it. It's human. It's something we all have to address in that way.
And I love how you're sort of painting the continuum, because yeah, some of the time it manifests in horrors like gun violence, but a lot of the time it's so much more subtle, and but it's still so separating. It's like we don't even, it's like, fish swimming in water not knowing we're in the water, and yet it really is so separating. So I so appreciate, I love, that's one of the things I know this about you from your dream symposiums. You're so humble and honest and authentic, and I so appreciate it, because I think that's the thing that enables people to find those parts of ourselves and say, like, me too, I can relate to that. So I so appreciate your
Oh,
honesty.
yeah. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, I mean, it's tragic how people lose each other, and they have to be right. There's something, we become so identified with our way of thought that if
And
I'm not,
competitive.
yeah,
You know,
yes, right, yeah, and threatened by somebody who doesn't believe our ideology or believe our, truth or whatever uh, we believe, it's threatening. And so families, siblings, partners lose each other over these things. They just can't. Um, and so, yeah, it needs to be understood and addressed. I think as we're moving into the next era of our human evolution, it's exposing, the things that just have not worked. It's time to really confront it and try to make it conscious. It's been running us like a computer program, all of this. Um, and it's time to check the coding in our programs and see what we can do about this, right?
so well put, so well
Yeah.
put. And it
Yeah.
strikes me as you were talking about it, I had the realization, not to beat a dead horse, because I know so many people talk about this, and I'm certainly not meaning this in a literal way of men and women, but there is something, when you were talking about all that it silences and excludes in us to be this way, I was thinking of how it's a, really the masculine out of balance. It's like the masculine, not men literally, but the masculine energy, like in the yin yang. That it's that kind of thinking of the competition and the separating and the power over and who's right, all that kind of stuff is very, and not that the masculine isn't also so important and valid, it is, but it has to exist in a balance. And the stuff that you're talking about strikes me as there are aspects of the divine feminine when we talk about inclusivity and we talk about, receiving and was thinking of one of my favorite quotes is from the playwright Terrence, and it is nothing human is alien to me. It's like we just hold it all, and that's what
Uh,
we need to be doing.
right.
And that's
Yeah. Right.
much more feminine in nature.
Right. Yeah. And that, that sacred feminine is just the mother who loves all her children, no matter what, no matter how different they are from one another. They're different, but just holds us all and holds us all together and wants us to love each other. It's so valuable. And that's the sort of sacred feminine that we want to retrieve, that masculine separating things out. Um, it has its point of clarification and discernment and, all those things. And then we have to have it with feminine that has this other way. Yeah, that's more
So
through the
well
heart.
put. It's
Yeah.
exactly what I was, yep, what I was meaning. So thank you.
Yeah.
So how do we understand more about how this works internally for us? And why do you think it is so pervasive?
Well, okay. So, as I said, I did study and teach the theories of David Bohm. He's known as the father of quantum physics. Um, and he was so articulate toward the end of his life about what he felt were the um, philosophical implications of his physics. And he was studying, actually, I like it. He saw on a little microscope how different cells, they have their cell walls and they were all kind of bouncing off of each other. And then he saw one that opened its cell wall and let another cell in. And then they joined and they became something else. And the inspiration came to him that that's how thought works. My thought, your thought, my thought, your thought. Where we've got these insulations around them. But if you open the cell, it's a whole new creation. So if you put your thought and my thought together in this, he said it's birthing new thought that is the hard thing. And he developed this system of dialogue where we learn to open our membranes of thought. These are the things I'm certain of. You can say that and say it with any kind amount of conviction that you need, but somebody else has a very different opposing point of view rather than just bouncing that off like, oh, that's Danny, that's Mark, that's Sally, that's not me. But if we inquire of one another, well, how do you see it that way? If we sort of open ourselves somewhat and try very respectfully and realize it's coming from some place that they see it so differently than we do. What is the place that it's coming from? What kind of respect can we give it? What are the questions that we can ask? And how we articulate then how we see it. And so we get all the different thoughts in the room instead of bouncing off of each other, which is what often happens in our meetings. My thought, your thought, my thought, your thought, boom, boom, boom. We all just, there it is. But, there isn't often, an attempt, a very conscious, deliberate attempt to get into this kind of dialogic situation. And he said it's about learning the nature of thought itself, that thought itself is something we just breathe in from the environment. It's not original generally. It's something that we get, that we're trained in, that even the way that a building is constructed forms our thought, that we live in this construction. Yeah, we're like gestated in the womb coming into this construction. So it's all a world that thought built and that thought perpetuates. So if we change our thought, we can change all of it. So if we learn how to change our thought and be open to new ways of thinking and, get deliberately, consciously into these efforts to open our own thoughts, because our thoughts are as valuable as the next person's and their thoughts are as valuable as ours, and just kind of take it like as a given for now that we're going to work on this. And so they're opposed to one another, and as Jung would say, bringing the opposites together, that's where the third thing happens, right? It's kind of like, here's two opposites, but when you open them, the third thing, the next thing, the new creation is happening. So that's how we actually contribute to the evolution of our lives and our thinking and our thoughts. Um, and Let's see, some of my, I'm looking at some of my notes. I made so many notes on these things, so many things I wanted to talk about. Oh, also, okay, so many things. One is I had a dream. This is just a good descriptive dream. In my dream, this was a couple months ago, probably working with some of these ideas. I was in a room full of people, and they all had read this book or seen that movie or done these things, and they all had really interesting opinions about the book, and opinions about the movie, and opinions about things. And I came in, and I hadn't read the book, so I didn't have an opinion, hadn't seen the movie, so I didn't have an opinion, and everybody had their opinions about things, and that's what made them a person. And I felt, in that room, I felt sort of like, I'm not even a person. I don't exist here. There's nothing for me here. And then some people came in from another country who, uh, in the dream, I don't know what countries they were from, but countries we know. It wasn't like aliens or anything, or, extraterrestrial. It was people from other countries, but they hadn't formed these kinds of opinions either. And I was able to talk to them. So it was like, okay, so how do we get into, uh, and I felt, really comfortable with them. So it just let me know this sort of nature of our opinions, kind of watch out for it. And I have seen, and I really believe there are people who are their own cult of one person. They've got their opinions. They're completely convinced of their own ability to form an opinion and then stick to it. And, it's a cult mindset, but they don't have to join with others around it. Maybe they can't find anybody who agrees with all their opinions. So they're a cult of one person. So it doesn't, even though the definition of a cult is basically a group phenomenon, I would say there's something about, you can be your own cult. And so, you know, be a little alert to that, that you're excluding uh, so many things when you're very, very stuck on your opinions. And I mentioned something about modernity, that we're all part of this cult of modernity. Brian Swim, who is a philosopher and scientist who I really admire, he calls it the modern industrial mind. It's like we have been trained in the last several hundred years in this modern industrial way of thinking, how we have built the world, how we expect nature to bend to our will, like they're doing right across the street from me. They're taking down a forest and they're putting in 46 townhomes. It's like they just bent that forest's nature to their will, and here we go. And It's happening everywhere. It's like it's the chaos of sort of our attempt to uh, control, and even the, the Judeo-Christian Bible says we are meant to have dominion. I mean, I think that's where all our problems started, is, in Genesis, where man is meant to have dominion over the rest of the planet. Oh my God, it came from there. And here we go. This is a thought form. This is a cult mind that has to be, reimagined and reconsidered. And I think that, we're talking about narcissism. We have it, in these certain examples that are classic, but basically humans, our whole race, our whole species really have become narcissistic because we think we're the only ones. Only we matter. It's knock out the home of all those forest creatures, it doesn't matter. Knock out their ability to have clean water, clean air. It doesn't matter. It's like humans are the thing that matters. And so that right there is a cult mind that we really need to reimagine and find the way to cure ourselves from. And there are methods. That's a lot of what I've worked with the indigenous mind. And I have a lot of stuff on my website around that. And I've taught a lot about that, but, it's not pathology that the indigenous people had. It's more of a, as Jung said, a recent adaptation of the human mind to be in this kind of like collective pathology that we're in. So, it's to acknowledge it. And as in they say in quantum physics, once you see it, you can change it. It's when you can't see it, like that mother, if she could have seen the rifle, she might have done something. She might have called somebody. She might have addressed it. She might have stopped it, but she couldn't see it. So, once we see it, as Jung says too, 90% of the problem is solved once you see it. Then you've got the other 10%, and that's hard. The change is hard. Making it conscious is 90% of it, though. So it's like, how do we make this conscious? Not be in denial about it. And once we see it, then it can change. Then most of the work is done. Then we know what we're working with and what to do. So, yeah.
This is so deep. I mean, I'm so glad you're saying all this. I mean, obviously, these kinds of conversations are part of how we make this conscious and break this spell, right? You're like,
exactly. It's breaking a spell. We're all under a spell, and it's not somebody over there. It's us. It's all of us. We're in this together.
and
Yeah.
it's so deep how you were describing. I mean, I could absolutely see this, how each thought is, it's all regurgitated, and so we pick up these things that feel the most resonant to us, and then we just hold tight and we won't let other things in. I mean, that was an incredible description of what it is that happens, and it's so easy to see how we got here. I mean, we have to think, these
Right.
thoughts are regurgitated. We have to we have to align with something. And then the problem becomes how we get so dug in, and like the membranes aren't permeable enough I love too when you were talking about how one opens and lets the other in. It's like it goes from this to like this, they
Uh-huh.
create
Right.
this
Yeah.
joint field that is, and it is different. That Jungian, the transcendent function, the third that is born, is different than the two. So it's so deep. What you are talking about is some of the deepest material that this is why it's so hard to see, because it's so in the fabric of how everything. It's in the fabric of everything all the time.
It really is. Yeah. And like I said, we're born into it. We're born into this thought structure. It starts from day one, and the training, starts from such an early age. Um, Buckminster Fuller says every child is born a genius and becomes de-geniused in the process of education.
I love Buckminster Fuller, and I've never heard that quote, but that is I mean,
Yeah, he
it's
used to
so
say it
sad
all
and
the
so
time.
true.
And we value education for the right reasons. For some, I mean, not for the right, always the right reason, but for good reason, we value education. But there's so much more. We really have to think our systems of education, they are narcissistic. They're training us in all the human stuff, you know, all of our narcissistic humans on top of the pyramid kind of consciousness is permeating our education system. You might have a course in something else somewhere, but it's elective and not important.
So true.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why these kinds of conversations, I mean, hopefully there is going to be a critical mass of people who implement some changes that are, they don't even have to be, it's like, that's the thing with this being so subtle. The fixes can be kind of subtle too if they're implemented right. It doesn't have to be like everything is 180 degrees. It's that there are certain basic things that we're teaching at the very beginning, so that everything else that gets built isn't built on this foundation of separateness and cultish mindsetness.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. Yes.
So, how do we step into clarity, strength, and power around this?
Well, the thought that I had when I was considering, okay, so what do we do? What do we do? And, to start with, I recommend uncertainty, just allow yourself, allow ourselves to be very uncertain. And because of the way that everything is set up, the people who are very certain, they know where they're going. They can put one foot in front of another. And the people who tend to be uncertain are kind of like sideways and not effective. But there's a different way to think about what it means to be uncertain. It means to be open. So I would say at least in our thoughts, meditations, um, contemplations are uh, opinions that are starting to form. Allow for that element of uncertainty, and especially when we're talking about the things that we can't possibly know, like, uh, you know, what happens after death, and are extraterrestrials really speaking to us, and um, you know, is spirit, you know, as uh, communicative as the human five senses can pick up? Is that really, you know, allow yourself to be uncertain about it all of it. It's like you cannot form certainties around so many of these things, and what we can pick up with our five senses is so minimal. And Buckminster Fuller, another one of his quotes is like, if you look at the spectrum of everything that affects any one of us at any given time, if the spectrum is this long, what we can pick up with our senses and our technologies is this long. The rest of it, we can't pick up with our senses or our technologies. It's all coming in from other sources. It's all these things that we don't know yet, but they're affecting us every minute. And so, what is all this? And I heard him say that when I was a teenager, who was a friend of our family's. And I think I decided it then, like, you guys take care of this over here. I am really want to investigate what's over here. So, I've always been into, you know, I don't know, religion, spirituality, all the things that one can learn, dreams, the more irrational sides of how to uh, receive uh, information in the world. It's like, okay, but to just not concentrate. And there's so many that are so afraid to lose touch with, that know some of these things are out there, might read an interesting article or a fun science fiction book sometime or something about it, but it to them it's outside the realm of what's knowable. There are different ways of knowing. There are other ways of knowing, and we know that we know what some of those things are. We cannot say why we know them, but we know that we know. And it's sort of getting in touch with that aspect of ourself, part that knows what it knows, what it knows, what it knows, and doesn't have to um, submit to whatever rational construction might come to argue with it. Well, I know it. And we've all had those moments, right? It's just trust those more, cultivate them more, follow those, follow the dream tracks, that the Aboriginal people talk about the dreaming and the song lines and the dream tracks. And, I feel like I've followed the dream tracks through my whole life. There's this event over here that's sort of a waking dream, and that event, which is a sleeping dream, and that event, which is another thing. And then it's like, if you follow the dreaming tracks, that's going to lead us through the sort of miasma of all this certainty that we're so addicted to. And the brain, as Bohm says, we become addicted to our thoughts, that a familiar thought actually produces a chemical in the brain that's like morphine. It's like, oh, yeah, it's like a endorphin that you get. And the things that create uncertainty, there's a reduction in the endorphins. So how do we live with that sort of hunger, that uh, we're not getting the endorphins here, but there's something else, there's a hunger here. How do we live with that? That sort of curiosity that might develop out of the uncertainty. Um, so yeah, those are some methods, we have to work with it ourselves from day to day and just cut ourselves loose. really. Let that ship go out to sea and we'll see where it goes without an oar or without a rudder. Like, see where it's going to take you. Yeah.
Such great, great guidance. And no wonder we're so bad at this. I mean, we are taught from the time we're so young that you're supposed to have math knowledge and know what you know and be an expert. And, you're like chasing certainty. And so and I think this is, you love Jung, I love Jung. And I think one of my favorite things about him was how he saw midlife as such a crux of a time, and so many things kind of change if you're letting it happen. And one of the biggest things is this sense of how little we actually do know, how little I know. I thought I knew so much more, and it's painful. I mean, this is not the stuff you're describing that we need to get better at. We aren't good at it because it's really hard. It's so disorienting
It is.
to
Yeah. Hmm.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That's
Yes.
so important. I mean, we are not, and hopefully, maybe there is enough pain and um, tragedy and trauma. I mean, our consciousness about that has been raised in the last number of years. I feel like more people are aware of that, and maybe, just maybe, the fact that there's so much known pain might be enough to help people feel more comfortable with the not knowing. Because I mean, if this is so bad, the not knowing can potentially, and will, I don't even think just potentially, but I think for people who don't trust this necessarily, it might just seem potential, but it could give rise to things that are so much better, so much, more inclusive and more present time, and synthesizing things. That, I mean, that's how it always works, right? You have dreams being one of the ways. We'll have these things we're struggling with individually, collectively, in groups, and then something just comes in, and it's like this birth of this new idea. And if we can just, I remember my Jungian analyst saying this to me once many years ago, that, Jung said, when you're feeling stuck, try not to act. And those words come to mind now, because it's that same kind of thing. We gotta be, it takes a lot of capacity, and a lot of, and I do think trust really helps. Honestly, that's one thing I can say from experience. Is I feel like in the years where I tried to do this more, where I didn't have as much trust, I think that's actually where my trust ended up coming from, was that I sort of like didn't have it. And then over time, I saw things grow that were, so as scared as I had been to make that space, I was so much better off for having done it. And I think that we just have to have more experiences like that, more corrective experiences of having the openness and the uncertainty yield things that actually help us. That, I think, is, but we can't have those experiences unless we make the space. It's so hard to make that space.
Really is. One of my professors said once, and I've always remembered this. This was just a personal thing that she was saying, but she said, I have found when there's just that thing that I just have to say, something's come up and this is the thing I just have to say. She said, when I have that feeling, that usually means don't say it. Back up. It's not open. It's like, uh, it's something else. And so I try to remember that. It's hard, it's hard to remember it when you just have to say that thing. It's hard to call yourself up and say, whoop, now's your moment. Just step back, let the moment go. If it's something important, there'll be a better time and a better energy to contribute. And we're talking about, we're so heartbroken, I would say, probably every single one of us, about the war, about the bombing, and how we meet violence with violence, and how insane it is, and how, like, please stop. But, it starts at the level of our own violence against ourselves, or violence against each other, and just our thoughts and words. It starts there. If we can just work with that, each of us, it will be a contributing factor to changing the field of consciousness we all inhabit together. So we're bombing each other with our opinions and our thoughts and our judgments and our, certainties and all of that. Those are bombs. Those are not, like stepping back and saying, let's create some kind of peace or dialogue here. It's really, not that different. If we can address it at this level, we wouldn't even build bombs. What? We would know better. So, there's a level where we have a responsibility to not create those bombs, of even just thought forms that go out from here and they touch the field of consciousness. So we there's so much we can contribute and we feel so powerless, but we're not. We're powerful, and this is one of the things that I felt like Jesus, who I said is a great teacher of mine, he said, the kingdom of God is in you, you know, don't look at it over here. This is not what I'm asking you to look at. I'm asking you to look at it in you. This is everything that I'm doing, you can do, and more. Buckminster Fuller used to say that too. People so admired him because he was so smart. And he said, I have just followed my thinking. You have this. Whatever you think I have that you don't have, you're wrong. You have it. Follow it. Do it. Um, that was his basic message all the time too. So in both of those great teachers of mine, Buckminster Fuller and Jesus, it's in us to do this and to change the world. You know, so
Your dream actually illustrated that so incredibly perfectly. Here you had come not prepared, and yet you were actually more prepared than the
uh,
people who had come prepared. You and the foreign people who came in who didn't know what, like it was so, that's so deep. It's so true. It's like, it reminds me of how we need to embrace diversity and not, there's such a white supremacy bias in our culture that
right.
reflected your dream. I mean, so it's just, it was so deep. It was such a
Yeah,
deep, and I love that too when you talked about that's a through line. We're not totally rudderless. We're not totally without a lighthouse when we don't know.
exactly.
We have
Yeah.
our own our
Yeah.
own unconscious, our own relationship to those parts of us that are trying to get through to us. They want to help us balance and course correct and to remind us that these are human beings we're dealing with. When you were saying before about the thoughts, our thoughts and words can be like bombs. So true. I mean, we talk when the bombs are going off, we're talking about how they're killing innocent people. And there is some truth to this that it's not exactly the same thoughts and words and bombs, but thoughts and words, we forget so quickly that these are other human beings with they're not crazy, they're not irrational, they're human beings who
Mhm.
are making decisions based on things that they have their own things that they're worried about and paying attention to and valuing to try to keep themselves and their families safe. So even if we're not in agreement, we're all human beings, we're all part of this same experience that I mean, and that's not just humans, this goes beyond humans, but in this case just humans, that it's so powerful. Your words are so powerful about how, I mean, just to remind us of, because it is violent, it is violent,
Yes,
we can be
it is
really violent.
violent. Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want to be that. We don't think of ourselves as violent, but we have to really take responsibility for the violence of our own opinions and thoughts and how it hurts and excludes. Um, and so, yeah, yeah. So, it's our job to become these peacemakers that we aspire to for the whole world. And we do it. We start, really in the most basic way within our own hearts and minds. Um, and
True.
I love the Dalai Lama's thing of the only religion is the religion of the heart. And no, what was it? The only temple is the temple of the heart, and the only religion is kindness. And I love that. Okay, it's like our heart. That's the sacred temple. Whatever that knows and thinks, and that value, its values, and the religion to practice is kindness. And that can be hard to do when we feel threatened or criticized or whatever it is, um, admonished. So, yeah.
And yet, as hard as it can be, for sure, but it also is something that is so basic to all of us. I mean, we do have that capacity. We do have, it's not like what we're looking for are these really complicated schematics of how we're going to get through. It's actually very basic, very simple, yet so profound, so difficult. Just because it's simple conceptually does not mean it's easy to do. It's incredibly difficult to do when, especially when you're feeling threatened, with so many people are in different ways.
Yeah.
So it's just it's but conversations like this are this is our remedy. This is how we contend with the stuff that we're talking about. We certainly can't pretend it's not going on. It is in front of our faces all day, every day. So so thank you so much, Taria, for this amazing, your words and it's so deep, and I'm so glad you picked this topic because it really is such a base truth that so much other stuff has been built on top of, and it's so applicable to so many different realms, whether you're talking about academia or um, you know, um, races. I feel like this is part of how racism happens,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
many things that this applies to. So, thank you so much for sharing this incredible, deep, heartfelt, literally wisdom with us.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for the opportunity. And you've just been such a delight to talk to. I really appreciate your presence and your questions and your thinking and your participation in the conversation has been really valuable. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And that's blessings for each of your listeners. I hope all of you will be blessed and benefited by the work that you're doing, Stacy, in creating this amazing summit.
Thank you, Taria, and blessed by your words. I mean, this is I am positive that people are going to be getting stuff from this because it's just like I said, it's so deep and yet so it's the most foundational yet the most profoundly deep. I don't know how you manage to do that all in one, but it really is both like the most kind of manifest, but also the most deeply, profoundly kind of buried, giving birth to all the things around it. It's like this nugget of very, very, very much needed clarity, and it's also a really compassionate view, as much as it's like kind of not stern, but it's like it's serious, and but it's also very it's very compassionate. It's like the fix is actually something that would feel so much better if we could do it more. So I just so appreciate your pointing to it. And I want to share about your free gift before we wrap up because it's such a great free gift. Um, so it is the Global Community Dream Symposium. So you are invited to participate in a monthly Global Community Dream Symposium conducted by Faria and her colleague Jocelyn Starfelt. Each month, dreamers from all over the world come to share their dreams and listen to the messages emerging, exploring the wisdom, guidance, and advice given through the collective dimension of the dreams. Together, we hear their voice and receive their medicine and their magic. Dreams offer insight from the depths of the world soul and of our psyches. Come enter the dream time, bring your dreams, and open your hearts to the wisdom received. And you can find that at Paria, and again, that's Tayria, word.com/dream symposium. And it'll be linked below the video. And I can say firsthand, it truly is an amazing gift. I have attended them and they are always really illuminating and they feel really connective because there is so much that shows itself in us and through us. And so when you see things in yourself, in others, there's something really, really magical and amazing about it. And I've had that experience every time I have been one of them. So wonderful.
Yeah, and everyone's welcome and it's free and there's a power to community dreaming, to really receiving the messages that are coming through the dreaming to the community. It's not just personal private, information that comes to you in your dreams. It's very collectively valuable. And so that's how we sort of receive it as a message for the community, as the indigenous people have done for thousands of years. They listen to the dreams of their village. That's how they conduct their lives. And so that's what we're doing too. And everyone's welcome. And you learn the language of the dream there. If there's one thing I would say to everyone, it's watch your dreams. Like give them respect. And it's a language that has to be learned. You don't understand it, it can sound very foreign, like it makes no sense at all. But anytime we listen to a foreign language, it doesn't make sense to us until we learn it. So you can learn the language of the dream, and it's not as hard as you think. So, yeah.
And so worth it. It's so
Yeah.
worth it there are such amazing gifts that come through our dreams that we would have no other way of receiving.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's the divine voice. It just comes from, another dimension of our self and psyche and the world soul. Yeah.
Such great parting words. But actually, we're going to have some more parting words from you, Taria, because I'm going to read something that I got from the website, which it's under. So Taria founded the Bridging Worlds Mountain Retreat Center, and so it's under the description of that. They seem so perfect to end with. So I appreciate you letting me read them.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear them.
Oh, beautiful. We humans as a species used to participate fluently in what eco-theologian Thomas Berry refers to as the Great Conversation, the dialogue that is taking place at all times among the elements of the natural world. We listened and understood the languages of plant, tree, rock, river, bird, animal, soil. This connection kept us in a healthy relationship with the delicate balance of nature. At some point in the course of history, we stopped listening, began overvaluing the human, talking only amongst ourselves, mistakenly believing that Earth's other systems existed to be subservient to our wants and needs without rights of their own. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and ecologically, humans are in peril if we do not make a heartfelt effort to reestablish these necessary relationships. We cannot afford to remain in denial any longer. Recovery is still possible. It begins with individuals, one by one, who are willing to reawaken.
Oh, Stacy, it means so much to me to hear you read that. I'm so grateful. And that really is a great summary of everything I just said, right?
It
It's
is
amazing.
perfect.
It's like, it is coherent. Yeah. And that makes me feel really good about that. It's like, yeah. And I wrote that, 20, 30 years ago. So, yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
so
get
glad
to,
I got through it without it made me emotional. The first couple times I tried to read through it, it made me emotional. So
oh,
I mean
oh,
it's just so deep. Taria, you're so deep. You really
oh,
and yet you make it so accessible. I mean, that's my favorite thing about you is you have this, you're like I mean, like a shaman. You have this deep wisdom and knowledge that is just so hard earned and you just it's so deep and yet you're so grounded and kind and you speak in ordinary language so that you're not trying to be above, you're trying to get everyone together and it's just so felt, it's so beautiful. You're just it's such a pleasure to know you and to get to be in conversation with you, and we're so lucky to have you here.
oh, oh. Well, right back to you, Stacy. It's just a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to know you and to be in conversation with you. So, and to be able to speak to you, the beautiful audience that you're assembling here that have come. So,
Thank you, Taria. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is watching and participating in this interview in the Boundless Psyche Timeless Soul Summit. Take care, everyone.